Chapter 151. Loneliness of Qingyuan Peak. Dense forest covered the mountain peak. Occasionally, there was a building hidden amongst the greenery. The green bird brought them midway up the mountain before stopping. Ruyu jumped down first, then she told Chen, "This is Qingyuan Peak. From now on, you are one of my Qingyuan Peak's men. Later, I will get someone to bring you around to familiarize you with the place." Chen nodded and started inspecting his surroundings. They were surrounded by tall trees and there was a never-ending row of buildings on a small platform at the front. A young man quickly ran out from the front. He moved strangely fast. Very soon, he arrived before the two of them. "Lu Sufeng, what are you doing here?" Chen exclaimed in shock after he saw the person's face clearly. Lu Sufeng was also shocked to see Chen. "Yi Chen, why are you here on Qingyuan Peak?" Ruyu had a stunned look on her pretty face when she saw that the two of them knew each other. She smiled and said, "It's good that you know each other. Sufeng, bring Yi Chen around to familiarize him with Qingyuan Peak. At the same time, help him arrange a good accommodation. This is the disciple your sister just accepted." Lu Sufeng had a look of disbelief in his eyes. "That can't be. Sis, you actually managed to accept a disciple. That is not possible. Are you itching for a beating? Go and get to work." Ruyu frowned slightly as she jokingly scolded him. Lu Sufeng smiled. "Never mind. Brother Yi, let me bring you around first. There are very few people on Qingyuan Peak. It is possible to get lost on Qingyuan Peak and not be able to find anyone to point you in the right direction." Chen did not expect Lu Sufeng and Ruyu to be siblings. What a coincidence. Lu Sufeng led Chen around to take a stroll. The two of them chatted as they walked and Lu Sufeng told Chen everything about Qingyuan Peak, without hiding anything from him. 20 years ago, the entire Heavenly Saber Pavilion suffered a great calamity. Even the pavilion master at that time died in that calamity. Of the 7 peaks, Qingyuan Peak suffered the greatest damage from the calamity. Almost all of the senior generation and elders of Qingyuan Peak died. The then Peak Master, who was Lu Sufeng's father, had his martial spirit destroyed and was crippled in the calamity. This meant that Qingyuan Peak had completely deteriorated. With no one from the older generation holding down the fort, the younger disciples had pretty much all left. All the disciples who entered Heavenly Saber Pavilion knew about the situation. Without a martial king managing the peak, naturally, no one would choose to come here. There were some who were low in strength and wanted to take advantage of the situation, but they were unable to satisfy her. This resulted in no enrollments for the past 20 years. There was not even a single official disciple. Chen asked doubtfully, what exactly was the calamity? For all of the elder generation, including the Heavenly Saber Pavilion's pavilion master, to die. How horrible. Lu Sufeng hesitated for a while before saying, "There is no problem in telling you. After all, it is not much of a secret. In each of all the major sects in the Great Qin nation, there is a huge sealed spatial crack. These seals are normally unbreakable. However, 1,000 years ago, Thunder Emperor Sang Mu came to Heavenly Saber Pavilion and fought with the Pavilion Master of that time. Back then, both Sang Mu and the Pavilion Master were peak martial sages. The aftershocks of the fight could easily level an entire mountain peak. The fight had affected the seal that the 3 Holy Lands had left behind. After the seal was damaged, the people of the 3 Holy Lands came to maintain it once in a while. However, 20 years ago, when it was the Divine Martial Gate's turn to maintain the seal, there was an accident and they came late. Lu Sufeng paused for a while before continuing, "You should be able to guess the result of that event. All sorts of demons came out from the demonic world, there was even a demon lord. According to the older generations, they said the entire Lingyun mountain range was covered in demonic qi. After the great battle, Heavenly Saber Pavilion became what you see today." Actually, Lu Sufeng did not know that much either. 20 years ago, he had not yet been born. He knew all this by listening to the stories of the older generation. Thus, certain bits of the story were vague and unclear. When Chen looked at the lunar shadow saber in his hand, his chest tightened. No wonder the old man outside the city said that if the Heavenly Saber Pavilion's people knew that he was the Thunder Emperor's successor, it would not result in a good ending for him. So that was the reason why, if it were not for the Thunder Emperor, the Heavenly Saber Pavilion would not have suffered the calamity. Suddenly, Xiao Chen thought of something. That's right, where is your father now? Is he no longer on Qingyuan Peak? Louis Sufeng pointed to the top of the peak. He is frequently at the top of Qingyuan Peak. He is supposedly in isolation training. Even I only get to see him a few times in a year. Xiao Chen exhaled in relief. The old man outside the city did not seem to have a martial spirit which would have made it easy to connect them together. At the moment, it looked like they were not connected. The two of them continued walking and loud shouting came from in front of them. Xiao Chen took a look and discovered the stout youth he had met the last time. There were metal boards on his arms and legs as he practiced punching. At his side, there was a delicate girl practicing an interesting fist technique. Its speed was very slow but it looked like it held a certain elegance. Xiao Chen looked carefully and discovered it was quite similar to the Yongchun fist of his previous life. Lu Sufeng explained, "This is Xiao Yang and Xiao Meng. They are the children of my father's old friend. They grew up together with me. However, they have a special constitution resulting in them being unable to condense a martial spirit." "What martial technique are they practicing? I don't think I've seen it before," Xiao Chen asked out of curiosity. Without a martial spirit, one would be considered a cripple. Back then, because he was not able to condense his martial spirit, he was mocked by the people of Xiao clan for many years. Lu Sufeng smiled. "It is passed down in their family. Don't look down on them. Even an ordinary martial master would be no match for Xiao Yang." When Xiao Yang heard the two voices, he took a careful look before revealing a pleasantly surprised smile. He removed the metal plates on his arms and legs before quickly running over. "Brother Sufeng, has the benefactor already entered the inner sect?" Xiao Chen felt uncomfortable but he smiled faintly. It was just a small thing. "Xiao Yang, you don't have to take it to heart. Just call me Yi Chen. We are all about the same age so there is no need to be so reserved." Xiao Yang revealed a guileless smile on his simple and honest face. He said seriously, "You saved the lives of Xiao Meng and I, that is definitely not a small thing." Lu Sufeng stood by the side and said, "Yi Chen has been accepted by my sister as her disciple. He will be staying on Qingyuan Peak from now on." When Xiao Yang heard that, he was pleasantly surprised. He said, "In that case, Xiao Meng and I will go and help tidy up the room. In the future, if there is anything you need, just give us the order." After he spoke, he took Xiao Meng and dashed off toward the front. Lu Sufeng was not even able to stop him. He could not help but smile bitterly. Those two brats. Why do I feel as if they are not normally as diligent? The two of them continued to head to the top of the mountain peak. Along the way, they saw many tall buildings. However, they were all empty, completely void of people. Finally, Lu Sufeng brought Xiao Chen to a pavilion located somewhere mid-mountain. There was a small brook flowing beside the pavilion and it was surrounded by a verdant forest that seemed endless. There was the sound of gushing water coming from the surroundings. Within the pavilion, there was a cool wind blowing. After walking for a long time, they were covered in sweat. When the cool wind blew, it felt very refreshing. Louis Sufeng said, "If you keep going upwards, you will arrive at the important places of Qingyuan Peak. The library and Qingyuan Pavilion are up there. There is usually someone from the main hall guarding them. It is best not to go there if you don't have to." "That's right, Yi Chen, there is something I'm quite curious about. Of the 7 peaks in the inner sect, why did you choose Qingyuan Peak? Based on your talent, you should be able to make it into any of the other peaks." Xiao Chen thought for a while before deciding to tell the truth. "My main purpose for coming to Qingyuan Peak is to learn listening to the sword and communicating with it." "Listening to the sword and communicating with it? Then you have come to the right place. In the entire Heavenly Saber Pavilion, only my sister and Leng Liusu have reached listening to the sword and communicating with it. However, this is something that is faintly discernible. It relies too much on comprehension and talent." Lu Sufeng was slightly shocked. He did not expect that Xiao Chen had come to Qingyuan Peak for such a reason. Xiao Chen thought that as Lu Ruyu's brother, he would have a better understanding of listening to the sword and communicating with it compared to ordinary people. Thus, he asked, "I hear some people say that listening to the sword and communicating with it is something innate. If one was not born with it, then no matter how high their talents were, they would not be able to reach it. Is there such a thing? Lu Sufeng smiled faintly. That is nonsense. My sister was able to acquire it without possessing such an ability at birth. However, no one knows how exactly she did it. A twinkle appeared in Xiao Chen's eyes. Lu Ruyu's listening to the sword and communicating with it was acquired by herself. However, he felt it was significantly stronger than Leng Liusu's. However, listening to the sword and communicating with it is something that can be discovered but not sought. If you focus too much on it, it is possible that there will be no result for the rest of your life. It is best not to be too persistent in pursuing it. Otherwise, it might end up affecting your cultivation. Xiao Chen smiled faintly to indicate that he understood. After grasping listening to the sword and communicating with it, it would be a great help when trying to learn any weapon. For a particular martial technique, regular cultivators might require days or months to learn it. However, for someone who grasped listening to the sword and communicating with it, it was possible to learn it within a day and even comprehend it on a deeper level. However, this sort of comprehension was too ethereal. Too many spent their time seeking it but not achieving anything in the end. Instead, they delayed their own cultivation. There were too many such examples. Grasping the lunar shadow saber tightly in his hand, Xiao Chen felt a conflict in his heart. He did not know if he would end up being like those people, not being able to obtain anything and ending up empty-handed. However, because of his oath, he had to at least give it a try. If he could not even muster up the courage to try, then it would show that he was too cowardly. After that, Lu Sufeng led Xiao Chen to his residence. There were very few people on Qingyuan Peak, so Xiao Chen was given a large courtyard. Xiao Yang and Xiao Meng were helping him tidy up the place, clearing out the dust and rubbish. By the time everyone left, it was already dusk. It was especially scenic when the sun set below the mountain. Xiao Chen did not spend much time resting. After he returned to his room, he immediately entered a state of cultivation. The purple thunder divine incantation continuously circulated throughout his body. The surrounding spiritual energy poured into his body like mist. What dense spiritual energy! Xiao Chen sighed. The spiritual energy here was stronger than at the foot of the mountain by twofold. It was also much stronger than in that strange cave behind the waterfall at Zhuang River's origins. No wonder the competition for an inner disciple spot was so intense. The environment for cultivating was much better here. Xiao Chen had become an inferior grade martial grand master not too long ago. He had to stabilize his cultivation realm. He circulated the gushing spiritual energy in his body for one great cycle before finally sending it to the Dantian. The gushing river immediately rose drastically. The tiny azure dragon swam around the river happily, occasionally causing splashes of water. These splashes of water were the purest essence. With just a thought, the river rose higher and the raging waves swelled up. A huge amount of essence flowed out of the Dantian and flowed through the various meridians of the body. The essence permeated the meridians and entered the skin, flesh, and bones, continuously nourishing Xiao Chen's powerful body. When the essence was exhausted, the spiritual energy absorbed from the surroundings flowed into the Dantian again. This never-ending cycle continued on, cycle after cycle. Time flew by very fast while cultivating. When Xiao Chen opened his eyes, the sky was starting to become bright. He felt very refreshed as he stretched himself. He felt like he was filled with limitless energy. Ko. There was a knocking sound and Lu Ruyu's melodious voice could be heard through the door. My little disciple, stop sleeping in, it is time to wake up. Just as Lu Ruyu was about to continue knocking, Xiao Chen's door suddenly opened. When she saw Xiao Chen's refreshed look, she said, "Good spirits. Remember, in the future, you have to go to the dueling grounds at this time every day. If you don't go, you will be punished. Let's go." Xiao Chen nodded and said, "I have not eaten breakfast yet." "Best to not eat, or else you might get a stomach ache," Lu Ruyu said casually with a smile on her face. "That's serious." Xiao Chen had a bad feeling. He followed Lu Ruyu and eventually they arrived at a wide dueling ground. This dueling ground was very large, and it was made completely of heavenly mountain stones. The domed roof was 100 meters tall. When standing in there, one would feel very small. In the middle of the dueling ground, there were all sorts of equipment displayed very prominently. However, in the large dueling ground, there was only Lu Sufeng practicing his saber alone. It was extremely spacious but empty. When Lu Sufeng saw Xiao Chen, he smiled faintly as a way of greeting him. Elder sister Ruyu, are there any exceptional saber techniques to pass on to me? Xiao Chen said with a smile. When they arrived at the dueling ground, Xiao Chen felt a lot more relaxed. Lu Ruyu scoffed and said, with your foundation, you want to learn an exceptional saber techniques, not to mention a heaven-ranked saber technique. You would not even understand the essence of an earth-ranked saber technique. This was not the first time that Lu Ruyu had said that Xiao Chen's foundation was bad. Xiao Chen felt slightly unconvinced even though he had switched to a saber without much training initially. However, I am considered to be quite diligent in practicing and have not been lazy at all. Why does she say that my foundations are bad? When Lu Ruyu saw Xiao Chen's slightly unconvinced look, she smiled. If you are not convinced, then execute your strongest saber technique against me. I guarantee I will not use a strength exceeding that of a martial grand master. Xiao Chen was also thinking of testing Lu Ruyu's strength. Back in returning Cloud Hall, because Lu Ruyu had attacked him suddenly, he had been feeling unconvinced. Now was the opportunity he had been waiting for. Xiao Chen held the lunar shadow saber horizontally in front of him and smiled, then take a good look at the world's fastest saber technique. I will only execute it once, it will definitely make you admit defeat willingly. Ka-ca. There was a flash of cold light, a huang dang sound, and the lunar shadow saber was suddenly pulled out of the scabbard. The instant it was pulled out of the scabbard, thunder crackled behind him. The lunar shadow saber was now flickering with electricity. Drawing the saber. Xiao Chen's momentum slowly increased, and soon, the saber light reached its peak speed and chopped at Lu Ruyu. At such a close distance and him making the first move, Xiao Chen was absolutely confident of making Lu Ruyu retreat. Once Lu Ruyu retreated, the rushing thunder saber technique's never-ending chain of attacks would instantly be initiated. Each saber strike would be stronger than the last. His momentum would be slowly raised to an extreme. Even if he was not able to defeat her, it would get her to take him seriously. Dang! A melodious metallic clang rang out. Xiao Chen was not able to see how she drew her small saber from the scabbard. He discovered that Lu Ruyu's saber was even faster than his. Even though it was initiated later than his move, it struck the lunar shadow saber violently. A huge force traveled through the blade of the saber. Xiao Chen's right hand, which was holding the saber, felt numb. There was even an impulse to cast aside the lunar shadow saber. When the huge force was sent into Xiao Chen's body, he stumbled backward by 2 steps before managing to slowly steady himself. Lu Ruyu's fast saber strike filled his mind. It was just an ordinary saber strike, not a martial technique like drawing the saber. However, its speed was inconceivably fast. However, Xiao Chen was still unconvinced as he had not yet managed to execute the rushing thunder saber technique. If given the opportunity, Lu Ruyu would look at him in a different light. Xiao Chen stomped forward and shouted. Thunder crackled again. The surging splashes from the gushing river in his dantian turned into a large amount of essence and flowed into the blade of his saber. The saber lit up again and Xiao Chen executed drawing the saber again. However, there was no change in the result. Lu Ruyu did not move from her original spot. Despite moving later on, the small saber in her hand broke the saber technique immediately. Seeing Xiao Chen staggering backward, Lu Ruyu's curled her lips and smiled. This is the world's fastest saber technique. It is merely so-so. After being mocked by a woman who was only slightly older than him, Xiao Chen became anxious. He continuously used drawing the saber but the result stayed the same. Xiao Chen staggered backward again. He waved his hands and said, "We can't do it this way, you can't block this move of mine. Otherwise, I will not be able to execute the more powerful moves that come after this." Lu Ruyu burst out in laughter, a rare charming expression appeared on her face. She said, "As you wish. Let me take a look at the world's fastest saber technique." Xiao Chen's eyes lit up. Right after Lu Ruyu spoke, he immediately executed drawing the saber. Lu Ruyu retreated backward and Xiao Chen immediately executed the arc-light chop. Dang! Xiao Chen maintained the posture for the arc-light chop, but there was a flash of cold light that struck the handle of the lunar shadow saber. This saber strike was fast and precise. It struck precisely at the space between the saber handle and Xiao Chen's fingers without hurting his fingers at all. Lu Ruyu sheathed her saber back in the scabbard. There was a stern look on her face as she gave off a murderous intent. I shall also release the world's fastest saber technique. I shall show you the true drawing the saber. Right after Lu Ruyu spoke, she immediately drew her saber. The instant the saber left the scabbard, a rush of wind appeared out of nowhere. The saber glowed with a piercing light which caused Xiao Chen's eyes to hurt. As a natural reflex, Xiao Chen closed his eyes. When he reopened his eyes, the howling wind had already stopped. Lu Ruyu withdrew her saber and stood upright, as though she had not done anything, as though everything that happened earlier was an illusion. However, Xiao Chen felt a slight chill on his neck. He stretched out his hand to touch it and he felt a mild pain. It was unknown when, but a small wound had appeared on his neck. He could not help but feel fear. If this wound had been slightly deeper, he would have lost his life. However, he had been unable to react at all. When the resplendent light lit up, in the instant he blinked, he had already been struck. Furthermore, in the instant she had made her move, Lu Ruyu had absolute control over her strength. Moving around freely, killing without batting an eyelid, this was the realm Lu Ruyu was in. Xiao Chen could not help but feel that it was funny. In the past, he thought he was already very fast. Now, he was thoroughly convinced. Lu Ruyu smiled faintly. Little Yi Chen, do you still have doubts about Master's strength? Xiao Chen smiled embarrassedly. I don't dare to anymore. I will always heed elder sister Ruyu's words in the future. Can you start teaching me now? A pretty smile appeared on Lu Ruyu's face. However, when Xiao Chen saw it, he could not help but shudder. There are some weights over there for training the body. Put on 100 kilograms of them, then run 20 laps around the dueling grounds. You are not allowed to use essence. If I discover any usage of essence, I will seal your acupoints and double your punishment. Xiao Chen looked at the huge dueling ground. One round would be at least 1 kilometer. He felt a headache coming on. Elder sister Ruyu, isn't this a little exaggerated? Lu Ruyu smiled faintly and said, first you mock your master, then you speak back. Run another 10 more laps. Damn. Xiao Chen cursed in his heart. This Lu Ruyu looked like a gentle elder sister. Who knew that she would be so merciless when she became fierce? When under someone else's roof, one has no choice but to lower their head. Xiao Chen walked over helplessly and slowly tied the weights to himself before starting to run. It was a good thing that his body was strong. He did not feel that it was too difficult. Lu Sufeng had a big smile on his face as he watched Xiao Chen running slowly. He walked over to Lu Ruyu and said, Sis, Xiao Chen was able to execute the rushing thunder saber technique with a crackle of thunder in every move. It was full of vigor. It could be said to be pretty good already. Why are you still giving him such a hard time? Lu Ruyu's pretty face revealed a faint smile. This fellow is too proud. He is likely to already have significant fighting experience. If I don't do this, he will not listen. Furthermore, his foundations are indeed too weak and he should improve them further. There is still more to the potential of the rushing thunder saber technique. Lu Sufeng thought of something and he said, that's right, sis, what do you think of the matter I mentioned yesterday? Listening to the sword and communicating with it, Lu Ruyu appeared to be deep in thought. Since Yi Chen was recommended by Feng Feishui and he previously saved Xiao Yang and Xiao Meng, there should be no problem with his character. If he wishes to learn, there is no problem in teaching him. However, this listening to the sword and communicating with it is too ethereal. Let's not deal with this for now. Lu Sufeng looked at Xiao Chen's figure and said, I feel that Qingyuan Peak has a decent chance in the end-of-year competition. When Lu Ruyu heard this, there was a look of melancholy in her eyes. She said indifferently, all these years, I have been trying to prove myself. However, there has never been any suitable successor in Qingyuan Peak. I hope I won't be disappointed this time. Xiao Chen spent a total of 4 hours running 30 laps. Initially, he felt as if it was nothing. After all, with the strength of his physical body, there was not much fatigue even if he did not use essence. However, toward the end, Xiao Chen felt that something was wrong. There was definitely some special material under the surface of the dueling ground. He felt his strength being exhausted very fast. Toward the end, every step he took made his entire body feel like it was falling apart. His breathing was labored and every step was extremely arduous. There were even a few times where he felt like he wanted to lie down and stop running. However, when he looked at that pretty figure and saw her expression, he could not help but muster up some pride. He must not fall before her, that would be too embarrassing. When he finally finished the last lap, Xiao Chen heaved a sigh of relief. He did his best to suppress the urge to fall over. Taking a deep breath, he sat down cross-legged and entered a cultivating state. When one is tired and one's body is pushed to its limits, that is the best time to bring out one's potential when entering a cultivating state. Xiao Chen understood this principle in the past, but there had never been anyone to monitor him like that, so he had never entered such a state of cultivation before. Now that there was this opportunity, there was naturally no reason to give it up. The purple thunder divine incantation slowly circulated throughout his body. After the circulating essence had completed a cycle, it permeated into the skin, flesh, and bones. Xiao Chen felt a relaxing feeling he had never experienced before. His body felt extremely comfortable. The sweat on his body slowly evaporated, turning into white steam. Ruyu stood by the side watching all this happen. She revealed an unexpected smile. There was a look of reminiscence in her eyes, as though she was seeing her past self. After a while, Xiao Chen slowly stopped the circulation of essence in his body. He opened his eyes and met Ruyu's gaze. He smiled faintly and stood up. Xiao Chen said indifferently, "Elder sister Ruyu, can you teach me now?" Ruyu smiled faintly. "Not bad, the saber technique you used should be the rushing thunder saber technique. I learned this saber technique before, when I was young. Later on, as it did not fit my style, I gave it up." Doubt flickered in Xiao Chen's eyes. Ruyu practiced the rushing thunder saber technique before. That was strange, didn't Feng Feishui say that it came from Heavenly Qin School? Seeing Xiao Chen's doubts, Ruyu explained, "It's not that strange. Heavenly Saber Pavilion has collected most of the saber techniques in the world, except for some inherited martial techniques. I had once given up on this saber technique due to its style. Let me ask you now, what do you think is the rushing thunder saber technique style? Do you think it suits you? What is the rushing thunder saber technique style?" Xiao Chen had never considered this question before. He did not even think of whether he was suited for this saber technique or not. However, after practicing this saber technique for so long, Xiao Chen already had a rough idea of the style of the rushing thunder saber technique. After thinking for a while, it was not too difficult to answer. Fierce and fast, pressing on with momentum, forceful and vigorous, like a gushing river. Once it starts, it's like an unceasing torrent continuously pressing forward. Ruyu nodded. "Looks like you have a pretty good understanding of it. However, the words you first used to describe it were just highlighting the special points of the rushing thunder saber technique, not its style. The style is the last bit you said, pressing forward continuously, never retreating. Retreating by a step can mean the difference between life and death, fighting desperately when confronting mortal danger. Before even fighting, you forced yourself onto a path of no return. Do you think this is suitable for you?" When Xiao Chen heard this, he was suddenly enlightened, like a crackle of thunder going off in his head. Questions he could not answer in the past were suddenly clear to him. He had always felt that his understanding of the rushing thunder saber technique was lacking something. Today, he finally understood what was he missing. He was missing the determination, an overflowing determination to never retreat even at the cost of his death. However, was this a suitable style for him? Xiao Chen could not help but think about this problem. After a long time, Xiao Chen's eyes lit up with determination. He recalled a lot of things before seriously saying, "I understand now. I am suitable for this style. Even if there are inadequacies now, I will never give up." Ruyu smiled faintly. "I feel that you are not suitable. When we exchanged moves earlier, you actually wanted me to let you have the first move in the hopes of taking advantage of it. That is definitely not the rushing thunder saber technique style." Xiao Chen could not understand, so he asked, "But my move was interrupted by you. How do I not retreat? That is impossible." Against an opponent of equal strength or cultivation realm, I will definitely not retreat. You are really stubborn. The amount of strength I used earlier definitely did not exceed that of a martial grandmaster. If you don't believe me, you can try again. A smile filled Lu Ruyu's pretty face. It seemed like she was eager to give it a try. Xiao Chen thought of the scene earlier and smiled embarrassedly. Let's not, I believe you. Lu Ruyu felt that that was unfortunate. She said, never mind then, I shall not mess with you anymore. It is a little early to be telling you all this, hence it is normal for you to not understand. Practice the 8 basic moves of the saber first and then show me. Xiao Chen revealed an embarrassed expression. I have not learned the basic saber moves before. When I was young, the clan only required us to practice palm techniques and fist techniques. The basics of saber was something optional. Back then, I had never thought of learning the saber, so I did not learn it. When Xiao Chen was young, he was unable to condense his martial spirit. Thus, he had focused on trying to condense it. There was nothing for him to practice, not even mentioning basic saber techniques. Later on, after Xiao Chen had successfully condensed his martial spirit, he did not place much focus on basic saber moves because he had to learn too many things. As a result, although he did not slack during his training and cultivating, he had never truly practiced basic saber moves. Lu Ruyu felt a headache coming. Sufeng, get your butt over here. Lu Sufeng, who was practicing at the side, stopped what he was doing and quickly rushed over. He asked, Sis, what's up? I have been defeated by this fellow. You will teach him the 8 basic movements of the saber. You have 1 day. I will come and check tomorrow. Lu Ruyu massaged her temples. She could feel a headache setting in. I shall leave first and will check tomorrow. That's right, leave the weights on his hands on. After Lu Ruyu spoke, she immediately left. Lu Sufeng looked at Xiao Chen and asked in disbelief, Yi Chen, did you really not learn basic saber moves before? Xiao Chen countered, is this important? I really have not learned it before. Lu Sufeng smiled bitterly, I really admire you. Fortunately, you did not enter by going through the outer sect. Basic saber techniques are the foundation of all saber techniques. Heavenly Saber Pavilion has a rule: if basic saber techniques have not been practiced to the small perfection, you cannot learn any martial techniques. So for people like us and cultivators who want to enter the Heavenly Saber Pavilion, basic saber techniques must be practiced to the small perfection. Most people would practice them to the middle perfection, and there would be some, like my sis, who persist in practice till the great perfection. Xiao Chen had not expected basic saber techniques to be so important. He could not help but ask, then, until how far have you practiced your basic saber techniques? Louis Sufeng smiled helplessly, I am not that persistent. After I reached the small perfection, I stopped. Let's stop talking. It's not too late for you to learn. Xiao Chen nodded and prepared to remove the weights on his hands. When Lu Sufeng saw what he was doing, he quickly stopped Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen could not help but say, don't tell me you are really going to make things difficult for a brother. Lu Sufeng had a very serious expression as he said, I am really not making things difficult for you. For you to be able to practice your rushing thunder saber technique until it can crackle with thunder is proof of your effort. Even in the history of Heavenly Saber Pavilion, there weren't many who could do that. My sis thinks highly of you, otherwise she would not have given you pointers on the style of the rushing thunder saber technique. The rushing thunder saber technique was created by a saber emperor. Although it is only a superior grade profound rank martial technique, its potential is unlimited. If you really want to improve it, the basic saber techniques have to be practiced to the great perfection. If you wish to learn it in such a short time span, you would end up suffering a lot. There really is no shortcut. When Xiao Chen heard this, he stopped what he was doing. Lu Sufeng started demonstrating the basic saber techniques. There were only 8 moves in the basic saber techniques: sweep, hack, push, parry, skim, swing, chop, and pierce. They were also known as the 8 basics moves of the saber. Since they were the basic saber techniques, naturally, they were easy to understand. Xiao Chen only had to take a look before understanding. Then he started practicing on his own. Because he was wearing 100 kilograms of weights, each movement was very difficult. Lu Sufeng kept shaking his head non-stop. Your legs should not be moving. Your arm needs to be raised higher. You should not pause when you sheath your saber. When Xiao Chen actually practiced by himself, he found that there were a lot of mistakes. It was just 8 simple movements, yet he kept making mistakes. The morning slowly passed like this. Meanwhile, Lu Sufeng kept giving him pointers, sometimes demonstrating for him to see. He was not at all impatient, resulting in Xiao Chen being very grateful to him. Brother Sufeng and brother Yi Chen, it's time to eat, came Xiao Meng's sweet voice from the dueling grounds. Xiao Yang and Xiao Meng were carrying some food as they slowly walked over to them. When Lu Sufeng saw this, he smiled faintly. Let's stop for the morning. Don't listen to my sis. When I practiced the basic saber techniques, it took me 2 years to reach the small perfection. It is impossible to grasp it within a day. Xiao Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead and nodded to indicate that he understood. These 8 moves were the foundation of all saber techniques. There were many changes, but they still stayed true to these 8 moves. Since the Heavenly Saber Pavilion stated that one must practice the basic saber techniques to the small perfection, naturally, there was a reason for this. After thinking about it, Xiao Chen could understand why. Lunch was personally cooked by Xiao Meng. She first served 2 bowls of plain porridge to Xiao Chen and Lu Sufeng. Fearing that Xiao Chen would not understand, she said, "This is elder sister Ruyu's instruction. After intense exercise, you must drink some porridge first and fill the stomach before eating the main dish." When Xiao Chen heard this, he smiled to himself. This woman is quite meticulous with the details. Even the nutritionists on earth said the same thing. Pu Tong. At that moment, Xiao Bai leapt out from the spirit blood jade around Xiao Chen's chest. After it came out, it looked at Xiao Meng with big watery eyes. What a cute little fox. Xiao Meng's face lit up with delight. As soon as Lu Sufeng saw the red piece of jade on Xiao Chen's chest, he had a strange look on his face. He said, "Is this spirit blood jade?" Xiao Chen nodded. He had not released this little fellow for the past few days. When Xiao Bai smelled the food, it desperately wanted to come out. Xiao Chen had interacted with these few people and found them to be kind, so he did not stop Xiao Bai. "Is there still porridge? This little fellow is hungry," Xiao Chen asked as he looked at her. Xiao Meng smiled slightly and nodded. After she filled a bowl full with porridge, she placed it in front of Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai revealed a cute smile and it rubbed its head against Xiao Meng. Xiao Meng was so happy that she laughed lightly. After they drank the porridge and had their lunch, Lu Sufeng pulled Xiao Chen to the side and said, "Yi Chen, if I'm not wrong, your spirit fox has the bloodline of a 6-tailed spirit fox." Xiao Chen nodded. "Is there any problem?" Lu Sufeng replied solemnly, "If there is no need, don't bring this fellow out of Qingyuan Peak. Yi Chen, you should understand the concept of not revealing your wealth." Xiao Chen felt it was strange and asked, "Could it be Heavenly Saber Pavilion is that lawless?" Lu Sufeng shook his head and smiled bitterly. Qingyuan Peak is naturally clean, but Heavenly Saber Pavilion is full of all sorts of people. There is a mixture of good and bad. It is not as pure as you think. The principle of the strong eating the weak applies here on a daily basis as well. Xiao Chen frowned slightly. He could not help but be deep in thought. He thought of the outer disciples like Lu Chen. If the Heavenly Saber Pavilion was full of people like this, then Lu Sufeng's words had to be considered. After they had lunch, Xiao Bai left the dueling ground with Xiao Meng without a conscience. Xiao Chen knew it did not like staying in the spirit blood jade. After all, there was not much danger in Qingyuan Peak. So, he let it be. "Yi Chen, I have something going on in the afternoon and won't be able to accompany you. My apologies," Lu Sufeng said apologetically to Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen nodded his head. Lu Sufeng already patiently taught him for the entire morning. He was already very grateful for that. He did not need him to continue staying here to guide him. Furthermore, the 8 basic movements of the saber did not require too much guidance. Lu Sufeng smiled when he saw Xiao Chen nod. "Interesting, I shall be leaving first. Remember not to remove the weights on your body. Otherwise, if my sis sees it, I will be in for it." Xiao Chen smiled faintly as he watched Lu Sufeng leave. He was not in a rush to practice the basic saber techniques. After he had completely digested all the food in his body, he warmed up his body. Relying just on his physical body, Xiao Chen started running slowly around the dueling ground. Xiao Chen experienced cultivating after his body reached the limits during the morning run. It was much more effective than usual. After a while, Xiao Chen slowly ran around the dueling grounds 5 or 6 times. This time, he could clearly feel a mysterious absorption coming from below the heavenly mountain stones. Every step he took, his physical strength would be sapped further. This feeling was very familiar. After thinking for a long time, he finally remembered where he encountered this feeling. When he was at the towering stone platform in the sage's ancient remnant at Savage Forest, every time someone climbed up the steps, they would exhaust a lot of essence. The difference between these two places was great. One absorbed physical energy, and the other absorbed essence. However, they worked the same way. Every time a step was taken, there would be a certain amount absorbed. However, Xiao Chen did not know if they were related. Sweat slowly covered Xiao Chen's forehead. As Xiao Chen wiped the sweat off and continued walking, he could feel his physical strength being exhausted. He clenched his teeth and continued running. Round after round, step by step in a tireless manner, he relied only on his physical strength and endured an endless loneliness. Xiao Chen continued running around the spacious dueling grounds. Xiao Chen ran and ran and ran, but he still had not reached his limits yet. I must persevere. After running 30 rounds, Xiao Chen felt a little giddy, but he knew this was not his limit yet. Xiao Chen continued running for 50 rounds before slowly coming to a stop. He controlled his body's impulse to immediately lie down and rest. Xiao Chen slowly sat in a cross-legged position and entered a state of cultivation. He slowly circulated the purple thunder divine incantation, and the essence started to flow into his meridians. It was unknown how long Ruyu stood quietly outside the door and watched Xiao Chen. Seeing Xiao Chen struggle, she seemed to see her younger self. Because the older generation had passed away, the originally bustling dueling ground became incomparably cold. However, she still dragged her young body around, running continuously like Xiao Chen was doing now. Resisting the limitless loneliness and relying on the power of her determination, she finally reached where she was, step by step. The essence permeated Xiao Chen's meridians and entered his skin, flesh, and bones. His whole body went numb again. His sweat evaporated continuously, creating pillars of white steam. The cells of his skin, flesh, and bones started to undergo this intense activity. After his body was pushed to the limits and tempered continuously by essence, it grew even stronger. After a while, Xiao Chen opened his eyes and stretched himself. There were crackling sounds coming from the bones all over his body. Even crisp crackle made him feel very spirited. Elder sister Ruyu, why are you here? Xiao Chen heard footsteps and turned around to discover Ruyu dressed in tight-fitting long robes walking over slowly to him. Ruyu revealed a warm smile. Her mature charm was now completely unleashed. That brat Sufeng goes to Jade Maiden Peak every afternoon. I felt worried and came over to take a look. You should have already learned the 8 moves of the saber. Show it to me now. Xiao Chen nodded his head and drew his saber with a huang dang sound. He focused himself and stepped forward with his right foot. His saber caused a pleasant wind as it swept across the air. This was the first move of the basic saber techniques, sweep. The saber paused in mid-air for a while, then he took a step forward with his left foot. His feet were pressed together. And he shouted lightly. The saber hacked downwards. This was the second move, hack. The instant the saber landed and moved to its lowest point, Xiao Chen took a step back and raised the saber. This was the third move, push. The remaining 5 moves, pair, skim, swing, chop, and pierce were all demonstrated with each step continuously. Although it was somewhat unproficient, he had barely achieved it in one breath. Ruyu nodded lightly and smiled. Not bad, at least the basic movements and steps are correct. It still lacks some vigor and coherence. However, just take it slowly. Use your 8 basic moves against me, and I will slowly guide you. You will understand after a while. These basic saber techniques was created by a predecessor after spending tens of thousands of years on it. It is very important to a saber user. Hearing Ruyu wanted him to exchange blows with her using the basic saber techniques, Xiao Chen felt overwhelmed by his master's favor. A martial saint was willing to exchange blows with him, teaching him the basic saber techniques. Literally, no one else got to enjoy such treatment before. Elder sister Ruyu, this is not right. It is just the basic saber techniques, I can practice it on my own. There is no need to waste your time. Xiao Chen rejected her offer. An impatient expression flashed on Lu Ruyu's pretty face. She said, "Stop dawdling. A man should be more direct. You are more sensitive and frustrating to deal with than a woman." Xiao Chen did not dare to disobey. He drew his saber and stood across from Lu Ruyu. Lu Ruyu revealed a smile and said, "That's the way, I'll make the first move." After she spoke, there was a cold gleam. Lu Ruyu's small saber moved forward and pierced towards Xiao Chen's chest. This was the pierce of the basic saber techniques. It was just a simple pierce, and Lu Ruyu made it look very vigorous, causing one not to dare underestimate its power. Xiao Chen remembered he could only use the 8 basic moves of the saber. He quickly used push and sent his saber up, blocking Lu Ruyu's move. This was not a true fight, it was only an exchange of pointers. Thus, there was no killing intent. While they exchanged moves, Lu Ruyu would occasionally give Xiao Chen some pointers, telling him of his mistakes. Then she would demonstrate it, showing the correct form to Xiao Chen with a serious expression. Xiao Chen had pretty good talent in the first place. With a few exchanges, he experienced a speedy improvement. Soon, he found the feeling of it. The days in Qingyuan Peak passed slowly like this. Lu Ruyu would come and exchange blows with Xiao Chen every afternoon. Aside from the basic saber techniques, Xiao Chen would take some time to run around the dueling grounds. Every day, he would push his body to the limit and then cultivate, tempering his body continuously. Now, Xiao Chen was able to run around the dueling grounds 100 times easily. In the night, Xiao Chen would lie on his bed and read the flowing cloud scripture Lu Chen gave him, sorting out the energies within his body. Because of the battle sage origin, his meridians were somewhat chaotic. These were the rare peaceful days where he could systematically manage everything he learned after he left Mohe City. When there was anything he did not understand, he would go to Lu Ruyu to ask for help, and he would always obtain a satisfactory answer. Although his cultivation did not increase by much in these days, his personal fighting strength had reached an unprecedented peak after he dealt with his problems. In the blink of an eye, 2 months passed. Xiao Chen's improvement in the basic saber techniques was good. He already reached the peak of the small perfection. After training the basic saber techniques to this level, Xiao Chen could obviously feel the strength of the rushing thunder saber technique increase significantly when he executed it again. Furthermore, he comprehended it at a deeper level. He was just short a step of getting his previously incomplete merger of his insights to the realm of perfection. In the end, there were some unfortunate manners. The thing he wanted to learn the most, listening to the sword and communicating with it, was rejected by Lu Ruyu. She only said it was not time yet. Since he was asked her of this favor, Xiao Chen could not push too hard. The most important thing was Lu Ruyu treated him really well in the past 2 months. On this day, Xiao Chen did the same as usual. He got up early and prepared to go to the dueling ground. The instant he opened his doors, he discovered Lu Ruyu and her brother, as well as Xiao Yang and Xiao Meng. They were standing outside his open door with a smile. Xiao Chen asked in confusion, "What day is today? Are we not going to the dueling grounds? Why did you guys come here?" Lu Sufeng chuckled, "You guessed correctly. We do not need to go to the dueling grounds today. We were afraid we would miss you. So, we came earlier to tell you the news." Lu Ruyu smiled warmly and continued, "Today is the day the Supreme Elder of Divine Saber Camp will give a lecture. That is the Supreme Elder, a Martial Monarch. So, I decided we will all go together." A Martial Monarch Supreme Elder, a fervent light lit up in Xiao Chen's eyes. There was a ripple in his normally calm heart. However, it was not surprising. A Martial Monarch was the strongest cultivator of the great Qin nation, or at least that it is what everyone knew. Each of the 10 known martial monarchs guarded a zone. Everyone wanted to listen to them give a lecture, but it was impossible to. Xiao Chen had not expected that Heavenly Saber Pavilion had a martial monarch to personally give lectures. Such opportunities were rare. Although it was not a one-on-one guidance, listening to him, or even having a glimpse of him from afar, could help them greatly on their path of cultivation. Lu Ruyu lightly blew a whistle, and a green bird slowly flew to them. She took the lead and leapt onto it. Then she said to Xiao Chen, "Yi Chen, get on. Come with me." Lui Sufeng smiled and said, "Sis, can you not be so biased? I am your blood brother after all. You're up to your old tricks again. Even if you had half the amount of perseverance that Yi Chen has, and went less often to Jade Maiden Peak to flirt with the female disciples, I would still not let you walk to heaven ascending platform," Lu Ruyu scolded as she sat on the green bird. When Xiao Yang and Xiao Meng heard this, they could not help but snicker. Under Lu Sufeng's jealous gaze, Xiao Chen climbed onto the green bird and flew off into the horizon with Lu Ruyu. High in the sky surrounded by clouds, Xiao Chen was sitting behind Lu Ruyu. The bird advanced forward through the clouds. Occasionally, other people on birds flew past them. They were cultivators going to the heaven ascending platform as well. The green bird was only so big and it was difficult for Xiao Chen to avoid touching Lu Ruyu occasionally. This caused Xiao Chen to be perturbed. Occasionally, there would be a slight breeze, causing Lu Ruyu's hair to hit Xiao Chen's face. The womanly fragrance of her hair entered Xiao Chen's nose. As this was a new experience for Xiao Chen, he did his best to control the natural reaction of his body. This was something that caused his heart to race and was extremely exciting, but he had to control himself. Xiao Chen was suffering. The desire in his heart grew greater and greater. In that very moment, an elegant ship was flying behind them. The ship was covered in all sorts of gold decorations. It looked very glorious. The ship had a fluttering black banner with the word, Song, Song, written on it. This was the Bian Peak's warship. Standing on the bow was the son of the Bian Peak's peak master, Song Qian. He was dressed in elegant clothes, and he looked very handsome. His hands were on the railing, and his clothes were fluttering. He looked very graceful and confident. There were a few other people on the deck. They were the disciples of Bian Peak. They were as numerous as the stars. They all stood behind Song Qinghe, making him look even more dignified. "Senior Sister Lu, there is still quite a distance to heaven ascending platform. Why don't you join me on the ship?" The young man shouted and revealed a smile when he saw Lu Ruyu. As Xiao Chen turned around to take a look, he that felt the scene in front of him was incredibly familiar. After thinking for a while, he realized what it was. This was similar to the sons of rich people driving around in their Mercedes-Benz trying to pick up girls. He could not help but smile to himself. No matter where one was, there would always be this kind of perfect guy. Lu Ruyu acted like she did not hear him. She did not even turn her head, and directed the green bird to continue flying forward. The young man could not help but feel anxious. He thought that Lu Ruyu had not heard him and he repeated his words even louder. However, Lu Ruyu was even more direct this time. She directed the green bird to suddenly double its speed, leaving that group of people behind. When Song Qinghe understood the situation, he smacked the railings furiously. He saw Xiao Chen riding behind Lu Ruyu and a murderous intent appeared in his eyes. He said in a sullen voice, "Who is the brat behind Lu Ruyu? I've never seen him before." A person beside him replied, "That is the disciple Lu Ruyu accepted recently. His name seems to be Yi Chen or something like that. He is 16 years old, and he is an inferior grade martial grand master." The one who replied was called Zhang Jin, and within Bian Peak, he was a well-known gossiper. He was not particularly strong, but he enjoyed listening to gossip. This was why he was especially knowledgeable on such matters. Song Qian frowned slightly as he was astonished. Lu Ruyu actually accepted a disciple. Has she not given up yet? This brat was so close to Lu Ruyu that she even let him ride the bird with her. He had eyed such a position for many years already. However, Lu Ruyu had always ignored him, completely not caring about him at all. When he saw Xiao Chen occupying such a position, he wished that he could immediately go over and kick him off. What kind of background does this brat have? How did he enter Heavenly Saber Pavilion? Song Qian continued to ask. Zhang Jin quickly answered. He came bearing Feng Feishui's recommendation letter and entered Qingyuan Peak. However, he does not seem to have much of a background. If he did, then he would not have been placed in Qingyuan Peak. Song Qinhei's eyes lit up as he smiled coldly. If he has no background, then it will be easy to deal with him. Lu Ruyu, I will make sure you give up. Regardless of the situation, Qingyuan Peak will end up as just a piece of history. Meanwhile, on the green bird, Xiao Chen found it strange, so he asked, Elder Sister Ruyu, why did you ignore the person who invited you onto the ship? A cold light appeared in Lu Ruyu's eyes as she replied in a cold voice, don't mention that person. He is just a dreg of society, the same as his father. If I boarded his ship, I'm afraid I would not be able to resist strangling him. Xiao Chen quickly kept quiet. He knew that he had asked about something he should not have. Suddenly, there was a melodious bird cry coming from above them. Lu Chen was descending slowly from above, riding on a similar bird. If he had looked carefully, he would have realized that the green bird Lu Chen was on was almost identical to the green bird they were riding on, regardless of its shape or color. Elder Sister Ruyu, you are going to Heaven Ascending platform, right? Let's have a wager on who will arrive first. The loser will give the winner 10 inferior grade spirit stones. Lu Chen smiled faintly as he spoke. Lu Ruyu rolled her eyes at Lu Chen. She replied in an irritated tone, stop speaking nonsense, can't you see I have a passenger with me? Lu Chen smiled faintly and did not seem bothered. Never mind, let's talk about proper matters. I went to Saber prison and saw Leng Liusu. He wants to meet your disciple. Xiao Chen was astonished and had an uncomfortable look on his face. Back then, he had saved Leng Liusu from Leng Liusu's grasp. After that incident, Xiao Chen did not change his appearance as he knew Leng Liusu was locked up. Lu Ruyu smiled coldly. Leng Liusu. Who does he think he is? We will speak again after he gets out. My disciple is not someone he can simply meet just because he wants to. Well, I've already passed on the message. Whether Yi Chen goes or not, it's up to him. I'll get going then. After Lu Chen spoke, he flew up into the sky on the green bird, disappearing from their sight. Xiao Chen felt very astonished at Lu Ruyu's words. He did not expect her to be so direct, especially her last sentence. It had moved Xiao Chen. The green bird continued flying for a while until a towering mountain peak surrounded by clouds appeared before them. The top of the peak was like heaven viewing platform, as though it had been flattened by someone. There was a huge plateau there, that was the heaven ascending platform. The heaven ascending platform was different from the heaven viewing platform. It was completely bare with not even a single building, there was only a tall stone platform. On the empty ground below the stone platform, there were crowds scattered around, all trying to get a good spot. As they were about to arrive, Xiao Chen could not help but ask, Elder Sister Ruyu, don't you want to know why Leng Liusu wants to meet me? Lu Ruyu smiled faintly, I don't care who you were in the past, all you have to remember is that you are now my disciple. Leng Liusu committed a grave mistake and is locked in Saber prison. He will never be able to get out in this lifetime. He probably does not have any good intentions in wanting to meet you. Curiosity killed the cat. Don't let me catch you sneaking off to meet him. While the two of them spoke, Lu Ruyu directed the green bird to land slowly on the heaven ascending platform. Lu Ruyu took the lead and jumped off before bringing Xiao Chen to an isolated corner to rest. The people on the platform were mostly people like Xiao Chen. They had ridden flying spirit beasts or warships over. There were still many people below the mountain peak rushing over. At that moment, a sparkling and translucent jade ship slowly flew over from the horizon. There was melodious music coming from the jade ship. There was a faint mist surrounding the ship, similar to that of the legendary celestial ships. The instant this ship appeared, it immediately attracted the attention of everyone on the platform. When they looked up, they could see all sorts of pretty women standing on the bow of the ship. They were very shapely and continuously sent forth melodious laughter. Jade Maiden Peak's ship is here. I hear the #1 beauty of Jade Maiden Peak, Chu Xinyan, will be coming as well. Is that true? This Chu Xinyan normally stays on Jade Maiden Peak. Although her reputation is widely renowned, I have never seen her personally before. I wonder if she really is as pretty as the rumors say. She is one of the 3 flowers of our heavenly saber pavilion. Aside from Lu Ruyu and Leng Liusu, there are no other women in heavenly saber pavilion who can compare to her. Xiao Chen's ears were very sharp. He could hear all the things these people were saying. He turned and took a look at Lu Ruyu's graceful features. Her exquisite face gave off a tasteful maturity. He could not help but wait in anticipation of this famous woman of Jade Maiden Peak, Chu Xinyan. The Jade ship slowly landed, and a bevy of young girls slowly came down from the ship. Amidst the spirit energy-filled Lingyun mountain range, the beauty of these girls was a treat for the eyes. After a while, amidst everyone's expectant gaze, a girl dressed in white casually walked off the ship. When she opened her eyes, it was like a deep starry night. Her hands were soft, her skin was smooth, her neck was long, her teeth were white and neat. She was a beauty of beauties. A faint smile appeared on her lightly powdered exquisite face. Xiao Chen took one look and felt as though his soul was being ripped out. Was she smiling at me? Every male was asking themselves the same question that Xiao Chen had in his head. Xiao Chen could feel his heart beating faster. Is Chu Xinyan pretty? Lu Ruyu suddenly asked in a teasing tone. Xiao Chen replied subconsciously, pretty. As pretty as me. Almost. Almost your head. Lu Ruyu violently hammered Xiao Chen's head with her fist. That little demon completely charmed Su Feng. If you get charmed by her too, I will throw you off Qingyuan Peak. Xiao Chen recovered his wits and rubbed the swelling lump on his head, moaning in pain as he did so. He sighed in his heart. An undeserved disaster. Looks like regardless of where one is, one should not talk about another girl in front of a pretty girl. Especially when the other girl is prettier than her. This result was very good proof of that. Lu Ruyu. While Xiao Chen's thoughts were in disarray, he heard a delicate voice. He looked in the direction of the voice, and he was startled. It was Leng Liusu. He subconsciously hid himself behind Lu Ruyu. Lu Ruyu also saw Leng Liusu. She frowned slightly, and a cold look appeared on her face. She looked at Leng Liusu, who was in a red dress, and smiled coldly. I thought Leng Tianyu already killed you. I did not expect to see you so healthy and active. Sorry to disappoint you, but I am not dead yet. I even advanced to Martial Saint, Leng Liusu retorted without backing down. The atmosphere seemed very volatile. Was every pretty woman in Heavenly Saber Pavilion at loggerheads with Lu Ruyu? Xiao Chen was starting to get a headache when he suddenly had a bad feeling. Indeed, Leng Liusu had seen Xiao Chen hiding behind Lu Ruyu. She felt he looked somewhat familiar and said, "Who is sneakily hiding behind you? Your new disciple. Is he too ashamed to be seen?" When Lu Ruyu heard this, she looked at Xiao Chen strangely and pushed him to the front. What is there to be ashamed of? What are you afraid of? Xiao Chen wanted to cry, but he was unable to. He truly was afraid of meeting her. He originally thought that it was a blessing to be able to avoid meeting Leng Tianyu. Never did he realize that he would bump into someone whom he wished to avoid even more, Leng Liusu. Turn around and let me take a look at you. The more Leng Liusu looked at Xiao Chen, the more familiar she felt him to be. Damn it. I've been discovered. Xiao Chen turned around and smiled faintly. We meet again, Miss Leng. It's you. Leng Liusu was stunned for a while before she managed to get out those words. Just as Xiao Chen was about to exhale in relief. You damn lascivious bastard. How dare you appear in front of me again? I will hack you to death. There was a huang dang sound as Leng Liusu drew her saber from its scabbard and hacked it towards Xiao Chen quickly. There was a resplendent light on her saber as she fired off some saber chi at him. Xiao Chen was startled and quickly dodged. The saber chi continued flying toward Lu Ruyu, who had been standing directly behind him. Lu Ruyu snorted and pulled out her small saber. With a shua sound, she shattered the saber chi. Leng Liusu saw Xiao Chen dodge and she made her saber buzz, reverberating the air. Xiao Chen felt as though the lunar shadow saber was about to escape on its own. Wang. The small saber in Lu Ruyu's hand also started to buzz non-stop. She dashed in front and stood in front of Xiao Chen, blocking Leng Liusu's attack. Bang! The two sabers clashed, and there was a resounding metallic sound. Lu Ruyu stood in her original spot without having moved, but Leng Liusu had to take 3 steps backward before she could dissipate the force from the saber. The sabers in their hands buzzed continuously. Lu Ruyu and Leng Liusu entered the state of listening to the sword and communicating with it. Its effect immediately spread throughout the surroundings. In a radius of 1,000 meters, everyone's weapon started vibrating. The sabers of some of the weaker cultivators actually flew out and stuck themselves in the ground in front of Ruyu and Leng Liusu. Soon, there were hundreds of sabers stuck in the ground. The nearby cultivators all came to watch. As the status of the two people fighting was not clear, no one dared interfere. Ruyu, are you preventing me from killing this lascivious bastard? Leng Liusu looked at Ruyu and said aggressively. Ruyu smiled coldly and said, with no intention of backing down, you keep saying my disciple is a lascivious bastard. Just because you said it, does that mean he is a lascivious bastard? You are the lascivious bastard. Since you keep claiming this, then tell me how he took advantage of you. He. Ruyu's words were so vicious that they caused Leng Liusu to blush deeply for a long time. However, how could she speak of such an embarrassing thing in front of everyone? Leng Liusu stomped her foot and said furiously, don't let me see you again. Otherwise, I will kill you. After she spoke, she glared angrily at Chen before leaving. Just like that, the disturbance calmed down. When the surrounding people realized that there was nothing else to see, they all started to retrieve their sabers and leave. Before they left, everyone gave Chen a meaningful glance. Their meaning was clear even without them having to say it out loud. You are really awesome. You even dare to molest the daughter of the pavilion master. Chen was not even able to retort to that. There was no way for him to explain himself. Looks like the title, Lascivious Bastard, was going to spread throughout Heavenly Saber Pavilion. Ruyu returned her saber to its scabbard before walking a few rounds around Chen, sizing him up. There was a faint smile on her face, which made one wonder what was she thinking about. Chen felt very uncomfortable being scrutinized like that. He tried to explain, elder sister Ruyu, it is actually all a misunderstanding. I really did not do anything. Ruyu smiled faintly, like a flower blossoming. There was nothing more beautiful that could be imagined. She patted Chen's shoulder. You don't have to explain anymore. Little Yi Chen, I understand. I really can't tell. You look so prim and proper, yet you are capable of such things. Chen felt incredibly depressed. He finally understood the fatty's pain. Just when he was able to explain, a warship flew over from the horizon again. It was a warship forged entirely of black profound iron. The banner on the bow of this ship had the word, Zhang, on it. Standing on the bow of the ship was a man dressed in black. His gaze was like lightning as his eyes swept across the platform. The people who were looked at by him felt as if their hearts were being stabbed with a sword. It was extremely unbearable. Qianduan Peak's Zhan is here. There is going to be a good show soon. I wonder what kind of expression he will make when he finds out about what happened earlier. He has been chasing after Leng Liusu for many years already. However, he has not even been able to touch her hands. This is going to be interesting. The people below were all discussing the recent events. Many of them were glancing at Chen, causing him to feel very uncomfortable. They were rejoicing in Chen's misfortune. The black warship shook for a bit before stopping. Zhan slowly led the Qianduan Peak's disciples to a corner. There were some people who knew Zhan, and they quickly rushed over to tell him what just happened. Zhan stopped moving, and his expression immediately turned sullen. His footsteps were heavy as he led the Qianduan Peak's disciples over to Chen, filled with murderous intent. Yi Chen right. Zhan stopped and stood about 3 meters away from Chen as he spoke. He was completely unleashing his aura, focusing his killing intent on Chen, and enunciating every word he spoke. He looked at Chen, who was hiding behind Ruyu, and said, "Dare you step forward?" His murderous intent was clear in his tone. He was not concealing it at all. If Chen stepped forward, he would definitely be greeted with a fierce attack. He is openly mocking me, and he immediately stepped forward to kill me over an unfounded story. Chen thought angrily as his own killing intent slowly extended out and his right hand was already on the lunar shadow saber's handle. Do you dare say that again? Ruyu suddenly spoke in an icy manner just as Chen was about to make his move. A cold look appeared on her pretty face. Zhang Xuan's chest tightened as he thought of Ruyu's past achievements and could not help but curse in his heart. He was too rash today. With his superior grade martial saint strength, he would not able to do anything in front of Ruyu. However, if he retreated in a sorry state in front of everyone, he would definitely become a laughingstock in the future. Furthermore, there were plenty of Qianduan peak disciples behind him as well. He might not lose to Lu Ruyu. Thinking of this, Zhang Zhan could not help but smile coldly. Why would I not dare? Dang. Right after Zhang Zhan spoke, there was a flash of cold light. The saber blade was already right before his eyes, and some strands of his hair were slowly falling to the ground. Zhang Zhan was astonished. He pushed his feet off of the ground and retreated backward. However, Lu Ruyu was much faster than him. Her saber chopped downwards and a crack immediately appeared on his battle armor around his chest. There was blood flowing out from the crack. The surrounding people all took in a breath of cold air. If this battle armor had not absorbed some of the impact, Zhang Zhan could have been chopped into two halves. Xiao Chen's eyes lit up. Lu Ruyu's move was the chop of the basic saber techniques. He did not expect it to unleash such might when executed by her. Blood spurted out from his wound, and it was incredibly painful. Zhang Zhan was truly angered now. His right hand moved backward, wanting to draw his saber. There was a huang dang sound, but he only managed to draw his saber out halfway before it got pushed back in by Lu Ruyu's left hand. The wind howled as she used her right leg to kick his chest at lightning speed. Her foot landed on his chest with an instant bang. Lu Ruyu had controlled her strength very well. Zhang Zhan was not kicked hard enough to fly into the air, he just fell onto the ground. There were ka sounds coming from his back. He had broken numerous ribs. When Zhang Zhan wanted to stand up, Lu Ruyu mercilessly stomped on his chest. Zhang Zhan grunted in pain. Blood leaked from the corner of his mouth as he lay on the ground again. Although it took so long to describe this, all this happened within just a few breaths of time. The two of them had only exchanged one move with each other. The Qianduan peak disciples were all unable to react in time. By the time they reacted, Zhang Zhan had already been severely injured by Lu Ruyu. He was lying on the ground, unable to move. Zhang Zhan was the top disciple of Qianduan Peak. He was as good as the Peak Lord's first grandson. He was also Qianduan Peak's true inheritor. If anything happened to him under the nose of everyone here, they would not have a happy ending either. The Qianduan Peak disciples all drew their sabers and quickly rushed at Lu Ruyu. Lu Ruyu laughed coldly and raised her aura. All the surrounding people could not help but tremble. This is the aura of a superior grade martial saint. She has actually already become a superior grade martial saint. How horrifying. No wonder she was able to defeat Zhang Zhan in one move. Their strength differed by too much. Under this horrifying aura, the Qianduan Peak disciples all stopped. They all looked at Lu Ruyu with shock-filled faces, not daring to take another step forward. Zhang Xuan's face was also filled with shock. He said in disbelief, "How can this be? 2 months ago, you were just a medial grade martial saint. How did you improve so fast?" When a cultivator reached martial saint, every grade gained would result in a huge improvement in strength. However, advancing forward was incredibly difficult as well. For some people, they had insufficient talents and were unable to proceed forward even after 10 years worth of time. Lu Ruyu was just 24 years old, and she was already a superior grade martial saint. It was likely that there were not many people with such talents in Heaven Saber Pavilion. Lu Ruyu stepped back and looked at Zhang Zhan, who was lying on the ground. She said coldly, "Scram. Stop putting on such high airs in front of me. Otherwise, I will kill you." Your father would not even dare to say anything. The Qianduan Peak disciples quickly helped Zhang Zhan up and applied golden salve on him. After they picked him up, they quickly left, fleeing rapidly. At this time, there were another 3 warships coming from the horizon. The words on the banners of the ship were, Lu, Yu, and Feng. The people of Wanren Peak, Baikan Peak, and Gangyu Peak are all here. What a coincidence, the true inheritors of the 3 peaks were also Leng Liusu's pursuers. I wonder what kind of reaction they would have. Some people below laughed as they spoke. Damn it. There is almost an army here. Xiao Chen felt a big headache coming on. He finally understood the saying from Confucius. The reason why women could not be offended was because the consequences are truly unbearable. How many pursuers does this woman has? It's never ending. When Lu Ruyu saw Xiao Chen's frustrated expression, she smiled faintly. If you were the young master of Heaven's Saber Pavilion, the men might chase after you too. Xiao Chen felt speechless as he said, this joke's not funny. By the way, elder sister Ruyu, doesn't such an innately beautiful woman like you have a few pursuers too? If there are some, then they would be useful to help me out of this situation. There were no expressions on Lu Ruyu's face as she said without a care, if I had such mindless pursuers, I would have killed them with one strike of a saber. I won't be able to provide you with such a person. The three warships slowly descended and soon, someone told them of the matters that had just occurred. The true inheritors of the three peaks took a glance at Xiao Chen. However, they were all afraid of Lu Ruyu and did not come over. Soon, many cultivators walked over from the bottom of the peak and rushed up to the platform. The huge platform was soon filled with people. Seems like the lecture of this martial emperor was a great attraction to all these cultivators. When Lu Sufeng and the rest saw Xiao Chen, they quickly rushed over. However, Lu Sufeng merely greeted Xiao Chen before rushing off to the place where the Jade Maiden Peak disciples were. Lu Ruyu snorted coldly, hopeless. Bo. Just as this moment, a spatial fluctuation appeared in the surroundings. There was a visible ripple spreading out in the air. This was the sign of a Martial Monarch arriving. When a cultivator reached Martial Monarch, they would obtain an initial grasp of spatial laws. Traveling thousands of kilometers in a breath was not considered difficult for them. After improving further, they would be able to condense their own laws and become sages, having a lifespan of 1,000 years. However, there was no news of any martial sages appearing in the great Qin nation for the past 1,000 years. Suddenly, the ripples turned rhythmical. A small spatial crack appeared on the tall platform in ascending heaven platform. An old man appeared from nowhere. The old man's face was full of wrinkles and there was a heavy sense of lethargy coming from him. However, his eyes were as bright as stars. They seemed deep and distant, as though they contained a limitless universe. A strong aura instantly spread throughout the entire mountain peak. Everyone could feel a huge pressure pressing on them. The noisy heaven ascending platform immediately turned quiet. Xiao Chen looked at the cultivator on the platform and was astonished. This was likely to be a peak Martial Monarch, who was just one step shy of becoming a sage. If the old man's lifespan could last long enough, it would be possible for him to advance. It has been a long time since I last came out. I'm not sure if I will have any more opportunities to in future. Alright, that's enough nonsense from me. I shall speak of some of my experiences. However, remember, everyone has their own style. Do not simply follow another person blindly. You should understand your own situation well and do not bite off more than you can chew. The old man's somewhat hoarse voice reached everyone's ears. His voice was not loud, but it seemed to be directly imprinted in their minds, resulting in his words not being easily forgotten. Back when I was young, I was full of hopes and dreams. I carried my beloved saber and came to Heavenly Saber Pavilion. I wanted to become the world's most powerful saber user. I wanted to learn a saber technique that was unblockable, the fastest saber technique in the world. When I started to become old, I realized how laughable and foolish I was in the past. I finally understood the concept of biting off more than one can chew, and trying to leap to the heavens in one step. By the time I understood that, I had already wasted tens of years. Everyone thinks the saber is the most tyrannical, the most valiant. However, they are not aware that every saber has their own feelings and character, be it gentle as water, or elegant and unconstrained, or straightforward and blunt. Likewise, every saber user has their own personalities. I remember in the past, I met a few ridiculously talented geniuses. The saber that accompanied me for many years was broken into half. I switched between several sabers and trained bitterly for many years, but I was still unable to match those geniuses. Some people were born blessed by the heavens. Everyone will eventually run into such people. Regardless of the situation, a saber can be replaced, but the heart of the saber user should not be shaken. The old man spoke very slowly. The contents of his lecture was very different from what Chen expected it to be. He originally thought he would be expounding on a very powerful martial technique. Who knew that he would only be talking about the experiences and comprehensions of an old man? His speech was extremely plain. He did not speak of any classics or discuss any profound theory. The old man only spoke of every difficulty he had experienced at every cultivation realm he'd been through. The ordinary experience accompanied with the ordinary manner of speaking of the old man did not result in any sudden improvements or enlightenment. However, everyone present had obtained some comprehensions. This was because the experiences the old man spoke of were experienced by the cultivators of varying cultivation realms. They were able to obtain an answer to many of the difficulties they were facing from the old man's words. When the old man spoke of the difficulties and setbacks he faced when he was a martial grand master, Chen listened very carefully. Afterwards, he compared it to his current situations. Many of the problems he faced were suddenly resolved. Furthermore, when he spoke of the martial saint realm, it provided Chen with a guide, allowing him to be able to make his path smoother. The old man not only spoke of his own experiences, he even spoke of some of his unique understandings towards saber techniques. Each explanation would be accompanied by his personal experience, using his real experiences as a case study. There were no gaps in what he said. Everyone present could understand it easily. Chen could not help but admire this old man. This was a true grand master. He did not speak of anything fake, or pretended to know anything. He did not speak of profound yet empty theories or unnecessarily complicated concepts. For nobody would be able to understand such words and would only raise more questions. The talent of a person dictates how fast he is able to progress. However, a person's perseverance determines how far would he be able to walk. One cannot give up as a result of lack of talent, looking down on themselves. Determination is the more important factor. After the old man said this, he left quietly without a trace. His voice was still reverberating in everyone's ears. This resulted in no one realizing the old man had left. After a long time, everyone snapped back to reality and realized the old man had already left. The platform started to go back to its previously noisy state. They all formed small groups of 2s or 3s and headed down the peak. As they went down, they discussed what they had learned. Xiao said excitedly, "As long as I have perseverance, I can become a martial emperor one day." Earlier, when the old man was speaking of his past experiences, he spoke of meeting a strong cultivator who focused on cultivating the body. He was extremely strong, comparable to that of a martial emperor. Thus, Xiao was extremely encouraged by this. Chen smiled faintly and kept quiet. He agreed with the last thing the old man said. If one had great talent but no perseverance, he would not go far on the path of cultivation. Ruyu looked into the distance and saw Lu Sufeng filled with a smiling expression as he accompanied Xinyan. She shook her head and said, "As for today's plan to pick the ice crystal flowers, leave it to Yi Chen and Sufeng. Xiao and Xiao Meng don't have to go. I spoke to Sufeng in the morning already. Just wait for him to be ready and you can go." Xiao shook his head and said, "Elder sister Ruyu, my heart is lit on fire. Please let me go as well." Burning your head. Ruyu used her saber handle to wrap the stout Xiaoyang's head. "You think you are some expert after listening to some words of advice. Cool yourself off first before you speak of this again." Xiao shut his mouth immediately after feeling the pain. He stopped speaking of being lit on fire or anything like that. He followed Ruyu down to the foot of the mountain. Chen did not leave with them. He stood there waiting for Lu Sufeng. After a while, Lu Sufeng headed over to Chen. To Chen's surprise, the #1 beauty of Jade Maiden Peak, Xinyan, followed along as well. Chen frowned. What is he doing? This brat was too reckless and rash, bringing a girl along when they were about to do some work. Lu Sufeng walked over quickly. His handsome face was covered in smiles. He made introductions for Chen. "This is Jade Maiden Peak's Miss Xinyan. She will be coming with us to Evil Wind Valley this time." "Hello, I am Xinyan. Lu Sufeng frequently mentions you to me." Xinyan took the initiative to greet Chen with a faint smile. The unforgettable beauty of Xinyan would normally cause one to feel stifled when they stood close to her. However, Chen had seen many pretty girls before and still had some immunity to it. Chen's expression did not change. He only smiled and said, "I wonder what business does Miss Chu have following us?" Before Xinyan could answer, Lu Sufeng rushed to answer. Aside from being a cultivator, Qingyuan is also an alchemist. Although she is able to obtain some herbs in the sect, it would cost too many contribution points. Thus, she would gather most of them by herself. Chu Xinyan nodded and acknowledged Lu Sufeng's answer. Xiao Chen felt speechless. Seeing the behavior of the two of them, he was sure Lu Sufeng had not even held her hand before. Never mind, as long as we can obtain the ice crystal flower. I hope there will not be any unexpected accidents, Xiao Chen thought helplessly in his heart. The three of them started to make their way down the mountain. Along the way, Lu Sufeng was enthusiastically speaking, commenting on all sorts of topics. Occasionally, Chu Xinyan would smile, making her look extremely pretty. This resulted in Lu Sufeng feeling very content and satisfied. Xiao Chen shook his head quietly. He could not do anything about this. After the three of them descended the mountain, they did not immediately leave Lingyun mountain range. Instead, they went to Heaven Saber Pavilion's Spirit Beast Workshop. It was quite a distance to Evil Wind Valley. Although the three of them were not slow, they did not wish to waste their essence on traveling. Thus, they intended to rent a few fast horses for the journey. Using the Intersect Disciple Identity Token, the three of them could rent the lowest grade horse for free. If they wished to rent a spirit beast to ride, they would have to pay extra. There were all sorts of spirit beasts reared in the Spirit Beast Workshop. If you had enough spirit stones, one would even be able to rent a high-ranked spirit beast to help them in fights. However, the three of them were only able to look at them. It was very expensive to rent them. Although Xiao Chen was not lacking in wealth, he could not simply reveal it. After they registered and picked their horses, they prepared to start their journey. Suddenly, there was a hostile voice coming from behind. "Brother Lu, please wait." Xiao Chen turned his head around and saw Song Qian, riding a 3-meter-tall flame cloud colt, heading over to them. Following behind him were several Bian Peak disciples riding on flame cloud colts as well. This flame cloud colt was a horse-type rank 3 spirit beast. Its fur was like a red cloud of fire, making it look especially pretty. Furthermore, it was able to run extremely fast, as though it were a surging fire cloud. Lu Sufeng saw Song Qian, and the smile on his face disappeared. After that, he immediately turned around and said, "Just ignore him, let's go." After he spoke, he immediately got on the horse. Xiao Chen and Chu Xinyan followed suit as well and disappeared from Song Qinhei's vision very quickly. Song Qian smiled coldly and patted his steed. He said, "Wait till I conquer your sister. Let's see how fiery your temper will be then." Suddenly, Zhang Jin, who was behind, said, "Senior brother Song, that brat rarely leaves Qingyuan Peak. This is a rare opportunity. We should be able to catch up to them quickly." Song Qian smiled, "I will make the decisions here. Today is the day the ice crystal flower blossoms. That sickly peasant on Qingyuan Peak needs the ice crystal flower to keep him alive." It seems like there was a grudge between Bian Peak and Qingyuan Peak. Otherwise, Lu Ruyu and Lu Sufeng would not have reacted the way they did the moment they saw Song Qinghei. Although Xiao Chen was curious, it was clear Lu Sufeng did not want to speak of it. Thus, Xiao Chen did not ask him about it. The three of them traveled very fast on the horses, kicking up a cloud of dust everywhere they traveled. Although they were not fine horses like the flame cloud colts, they were still much faster than ordinary horses. After they traveled for 4 hours, the three of them finally reached Evil Wind Valley. Like the previous time, the outskirts were bustling. It was possible this was the first time Chu Xinyan came to this kind of place. She was very curious and looked around everywhere. However, when such a pretty girl like her did not maintain a low profile, she would attract a lot of attention. Very soon, she attracted the gaze of every cultivator in Evil Wind Valley. Xiao Chen even heard the drool dripping out of their mouths non-stop. They were as vulgar as they could possibly be. He could not help but think, "I hope there would not be any trouble." It was a good thing the three of them had silver identity tokens. It made their statuses very clear. These outer disciples could not watch and not take any actions against them. Even the most ordinary disciple in the inner sect would be able to easily kill 3 outer disciples in an instant. This was the result of the strict and intense competition. Lu Sufeng finally recovered his complexion and found a place to keep the horses. It was clear he was familiar with the place. After that, the three of them quickly entered Evil Wind Valley. Yongsan, I'm afraid something might go wrong. Can we go pick the ice crystal flower first? Lu Sufeng asked Chu Xinyan. Chu Xinyan smiled. I don't have a problem with that. After all, I don't need the herbs urgently. I'll just treat it like seeing the sights. Lu Sufeng smiled when he heard this. They quickly made their way to the place where the ice crystal flower would be. There was a senior in Qingyuan Peak that required the ice crystal flower to help him stay alive. Thus, Lu Sufeng would regularly come to pick the ice crystal flowers. The good thing was that senior had almost recovered. After this round, he should be able to completely recover, and they would not need to go to all this trouble anymore. Lu Sufeng led the way. This was not his first time coming here, and he was a lot more familiar with the place than Xiao Chen. Along their way, they passed by rivers and forests, but they managed to arrive at that cliffside without meeting any spirit beasts. Something is not right, there must be a problem. The three of them just exited the forest, and they smelled an extremely bloody stench blown over by the wind. Lu Sufeng's complexion turned pale as they quickly rushed forward. Below the towering cliffside, there were two dead young ice apes lying there. Their chests were cut open, and the valuable parts and spirit cores had been taken away. When they looked up the cliffside, the spot where the ice crystal flower had originally been was now empty. Even its roots and leaves had been pulled out by someone. This was a herb they needed to save someone, and yet, it had been taken away by someone. Lu Sufeng had a vacant look as he muttered, how did it turn out like this? Who is so malicious to even pull out the roots? Xiao Chen checked out the bodies of the young ice apes and found their blood was not dry yet. Based on the state of the wounds, it was clear the person had left recently. Xiao Chen extended out his spiritual sense, and instantly, everything within 2,000 odd meters appeared in his mind. Xiao Chen eliminated every cultivator one by one. Finally, Xiao noticed two martial grand masters. They were hiding their silver identity tokens from view. Xiao Chen retracted his spiritual sense and turned it into a thread. He scanned the body of the two of them and found one of them was carrying a parcel containing an ice crystal flower in his embrace. After they walked for a long time, they stopped in the middle of the forest. A group of cultivators riding flame cloud colts had been waiting there for a long time. The one leading them was none other than Song Qian. He received the ice crystal flow and revealed a sinister smile. He said, Lu Ruyu, let's see how you reject me this time. When I thoroughly conquer you, Qingyuan Peak will be naturally annexed by my Bian Peak. Xiao Chen's expression turned cold and rage built in his heart. He was emitting a heavy killing intent. His expression was especially fierce. Beside this group of people, there was an outer disciple dressed in flowery robes. It was the person who mocked the scarred man previously, Yan Tianzhong. Yan Tianzhong smiled faintly. Big brother Song, I did pretty well completing this errand, right? Amongst the outer sect, I'm the one with the most spies. If you want me to keep an eye on a person, I would definitely be able to uncover all his secrets thoroughly. This Yan Tianzhong was the Zaihe province's Yan clan's second young master. With his huge background, Song Qian did not dare slight him. He said slowly as he smiled, Brother Yan, stop joking with me. How can this be you running an errand for me? I, Song Qian, owe you a favor. There will definitely a spot for you in Bian Peak. Yan Tianzhong smiled in satisfaction. He worked so hard for Song Qian so he could achieve such a result. If he were able to enter Bian Peak, his position in the clan would immediately soar. Xiao Chen could no longer be bothered to keep listening. He left a spiritual mark on Song Qian before quickly retracting his spiritual sense. Lu Sufeng still had a black look on his face. Chu Yongsan, who was beside him, did not know how to console him. Xiao Chen thought for a while before saying, this ice crystal flower was taken away by Song Qian. Song Qian. Lu Sufeng was stunned when he heard that. Yi Chen, how do you know this? Of course, Xiao Chen could not tell him his secret and had no better option than lying. I have a secret treasure that has extremely strong perception. I saw two inner disciples handing the ice crystal flower to Song Qian. Despicable. Lu Sufeng said lividly. He balled his right hand into a fist and punched the cliffside violently. Cracks appeared on the cliffside, and rocks tumbled down. This Song Qian must be intending to use the ice crystal flower to threaten my sis. Previously, his father tried to arrange a marriage between them as an excuse to annex Qingyuan Peak. After they were rejected by my sis, they were not resigned. Now, they are using such despicable means. Chu Xinyan was calmer and though about the details. She asked Xiao Chen, Yi Chen, how many people did Song Qian bring? What are their levels of cultivation? Xiao Chen replied, including him, there is a total of 10 inner disciples. The strongest is Song Qian, who is a peak martial grand master. Aside from them, there is also an outer disciple called Yan Tianzheng. He is an inferior grade martial grand master. He was the one who followed Lu Sufeng and reported his whereabouts to Song Qian. When Chu Xinyan heard this, rage appeared on her pretty face. The weakest inner disciple would be, at least, a medial grade martial grand master. Adding Yan Tianzheng, there was a total of 11 martial grand masters. On their side, there were only 3 of them. The difference in strength was too big. A cold light flashed in Lu Sufeng's eyes. He said in a cold voice, ignore everything else, we have to get the ice crystal flower. Otherwise, that bastard might be able to have his way with my sis. Yi Chen, lead the way. We have to intercept them before leaving the valley. Xiao Chen nodded and felt for the spiritual mark he left behind. He executed the Azure Dragon Cloud soaring art and headed rapidly to that group of people, moving as fast as lightning. He was continually thinking of the situation along the way. The inner disciples of Heavenly Saber Pavilion were elites. Amongst the same cultivation realm and grade, the ordinary cultivators would not be a match for them. Xiao Chen did not dare be careless. Suddenly, Xiao Chen stopped. He said, the distance is too huge. Furthermore, they are riding flame cloud colts. We will never be able to catch up. After he spoke, a silver warship appeared out of his eye. He ignored their shock and promptly said, quickly, get on. The situation was urgent. Although Chu Yongxin and Lu Sufeng were astonished, they did not have an opportunity to ask any questions. They directly jumped on without a further word. After the 2 of them boarded, Xiao Chen operated the formations on the silver warship with all his might. They transformed into a silver flash as they flew swiftly forward. It only took a while for Xiao Chen to rush ahead of Song Qinhei's group. Xiao Chen immediately descended and leapt onto a big tree. They should be going past here. Do not show any mercy, kill them all. There were no emotions in Xiao Chen's words, he was incredibly cold. Chu Xinyan and Lu Sufeng even trembled slightly in fear. Chu Xinyan said, Yi Chen, killing fellow sect members is a serious felony in Heavenly Saber Pavilion. If we were caught, we would be executed. We should talk it over with Song Qian. How naive. Xiao Chen smiled coldly and said, do you think everyone is as pure as you are? If you are afraid, you don't have to participate. Soft-heartedness will only ruin things. This matter has nothing to do with you in the first place, anyway. Chu Xinyan was stunned when she heard this. She frowned slightly. She was so angered by Xiao Chen, she choked. She did not expect Xiao Chen to be so direct. There were no men in Heavenly Saber Pavilion who dared speak to her like that. Lu Sufeng also advised, this might really be a fight to the death. Xinyan, it would be best if you hide first. Dong, dong, dong. The galloping of horses could be heard from ahead, the ground was trembling slightly. Xiao Chen could feel the slight tremors of the tree while he was hidden in it. He took out the Soul Slayer bow and essence light arrows and focused, drawing the bow. There was nothing else in his vision, only his target. Su. When Song Qian and the others appeared in Xiao Chen's vision, Xiao Chen did not hesitate to release the arrow. The essence light arrow turned into a beam of light and flew rapidly to the front, carrying a boundless killing intent. This arrow was not fired at Song Qian. This battle was too dangerous, so Xiao Chen did not dare to expect too much, finishing this off in one shot. This arrow was aimed at the weakest person in the group, Zhang Jin. As the steeds galloped and dusk rose into the air, Song Qian, who was riding on a horse, suddenly felt a killing intent incoming. He saw a beam of cold light and quickly dismounted and shouted, enemy attack. Dismount, quickly. Xiao Chen was astonished. It was fortunate he did not aim the essence light arrow at this person. Given his reaction time, it was likely that he would have gained no returns for his efforts. While Zhang Jin was in the middle of dismounting, the essence light arrow arrived with a "su" sound and struck his neck. The huge force behind the arrow instantly knocked him off the horse. Zhang Jin was knocked flying backwards and crashed into another cultivator. The flame cloud colt was startled and began prancing around wildly, turning the whole place chaotic. Amidst the chaos, another essence light arrow flashed by and struck the neck of another Bian Peak disciple, pinning him on the ground dead. In the blink of an eye, 2 martial grand masters were killed. Panic broke out in the group. All of them hid themselves behind the tall flame cloud colts. Chen saw that there were no other opportunities and put away the Soul Slayer bow. He took out his lunar shadow saber and said, "Let's make our move, the 2 of you need to help me delay Song Qian." Seeing Chen decisively make plans to attack and kill 2 Bian Peak disciples in an instant, Lu Sufeng and Chu Yongsan were in a state of disbelief. After all, they were fellow disciples of Heavenly Saber Pavilion, so they still had some reservations in their heart. Lu Sufeng only reacted after Chen spoke. He quickly leapt down from the tree. Chu Xinyan hesitated for a while before following. A bolt of lightning streaked by in the sky as Chen descended down and landed beside Song Qian. Standing behind the flame cloud colt, Song Qian could see Chen's appearance clearly. He said in astonishment, "It's you, Lu Ruyu's disciple. You dare kill my Bian Peak's people. You are truly seeking death." The instant he spoke, the remaining 8 cultivators all stuck their heads out and saw only Chen. Their initial fear immediately vanished as they used their auras to surround Chen in pressure. "You delivered yourself to me, so don't blame me for taking harsh measures. Kill him." Song Qinhei's expression turned cold as he spoke. Huang dang dang. Sabers were drawn from their scabbards as saber lights lit the area up. There were flashes of cold light and howling of wind as 8 figures rushed at Chen, accompanied by a boundless killing intent that zeroed in on Chen. Song Qian did not make a move personally. In his eyes, Chen was already a dead man. There was no need for him to make a move. He looked into the distance and saw figures rushing over quickly. The corner of his mouth curled up in a cold smile. Lu Sufeng and Chu Xinyan. "This is fine too, it's a good excuse for me to make a move on you." Flight on wings, disordered dance of 1,000 years. Chen calmly executed the disordered dance of 1,000 years. A strong air current surrounded him. He was already in the sky, continuously changing his stances. Saber light flew everywhere chaotically, and there were plenty of metallic clangs. Chen left behind a series of after images, instantly sending out countless strikes. Despite attacking later, his attacks struck the 8 people attacking him first. There were plenty of after images, and they were not able to differentiate the real from the fakes. The Bian Peak disciples looked at the images in the sky, not even able to tell where Chen was. They had to stick to passively defending with their sabers every time a saber light came flying at them. These 8 people were countered by Chen in an instant. Furthermore, he did not seem to be at a disadvantage at all, in fact holding the upper hand. The boundless saber lights seemed never-ending, combining with the countless afterimages in the sky, which dazed them. When the disordered dance of 1,000 years was completely executed, Chen's body paused in midair and the azure dragon leapt out of the river in his body. His actions made it seem as though he had leapt in midair and retreated backward quickly. When he landed, the 8 cultivators were all injured to a certain degree, with at least multiple wounds incurred. Yan Tianzheng, who was amongst the crowd, suddenly shouted angrily, "I'll smash you to death." Dragon seizing hand. A huge black hand appeared above Chen's head, blocking out the sun and covering the sky as it smashed violently toward Chen. Chen's expression changed slightly. He did not expect this Yan Tianzheng to be a disciple of the Yan clan with an inherited martial spirit. He pushed his feet off the ground and quickly dodged. The remaining 7 people moved continuously and quickly rushed at Chen. Saber lights flew chaotically from everywhere in his direction, as the 7 people used their martial techniques to attack Chen. Chen did not panic in the face of danger and completely unleashed everything he had comprehended in the past few days. He only used the basic saber techniques to break these martial techniques one by one. The 8 moves of the saber: sweep, hack, push, parry, skim, swing, chop, and pierce. Whenever there was an opening, he would attack, making practical use of everything he had learned while fighting with 7 people at the same time. Occasionally, he would dodge the huge black hand above him. The heaven-ranked movement technique, Azure Dragon Cloud Soaring Art, allowed Xiao Chen to be as agile as a flood dragon. Although the situation was dangerous, he was not injured at all. These 7 people were all Bian Peak disciples. They frequently practiced together and were able to cooperate with each other perfectly. Xiao Chen was not able to find a weak point and could only fight them to a standstill. On the other side, Lu Sufeng knew that their identities were already uncovered, so he did not hesitate to draw his saber and engage Song Qian. The both of them had grasped the various techniques of Qingyuan Peak and Bian Peak, which made their fight very intense. However, Song Qinhei's cultivation was slightly higher than Lu Sufeng. He had held the advantage since the very start. If it was not for Chu Xinyan helping Lu Sufeng at the side, a dangerous situation might have occurred. Chu Xinyan, have you forgotten the rules of Heavenly Saber Pavilion? They have already committed a grave felony by attacking their fellow sect mates. If you help them, you will be committing the same error. Seeing the fight drag on, Song Qian made use of psychological tactics on Chu Xinyan. These words were precisely what struck Chu Xinyan's nerves. Her hands could not help but pause for a moment. Song Qian smiled coldly and took advantage of this opportunity to send out 3 after images. His body was like flowing water and his speed suddenly doubled. This was the 3 flowing cloud images of Bian Peak. Lu Sufeng, who had been working with Chu Xinyan, was caught off guard and got struck by the 3 sabers. 3 bloody wounds appeared on his chest, and blood flowed out immediately. Seeing Lu Sufeng get injured, Chu Xinyan suddenly came to her senses. She quickly moved to block Song Qinhei's killing blow. The 2 of them worked together once again to defend against Song Qinhei's attacks. However, it was clear they were at a disadvantage. Xiao Chen handled his saber skillfully and dealt with the saber lights of the 7 people. He saw the earlier scene clearly and could not help but sigh. At such a crucial point, Chu Xinyan was actually still in a daze. This lady is not reliable. Shua. Noticing Xiao Chen being distracted, one of the 7 cultivators took advantage of the opportunity to increase his speed and used his saber to rend a small cut on Xiao Chen's arm. The group began rejoicing. After exchanging blows for so long, they had finally managed to injure Xiao Chen. Their morale was immediately boosted, and the cold gleam on their blades turned even sharper. Xiao Chen smiled faintly to himself. He glanced at the descending black hand and pretended to trip before being smashed away by it. He staggered over and fell before climbing back up in a miserable manner. The group behind him immediately took advantage of the gap created and used several saber lights to hack at him. By the time Xiao Chen turned around, his body was covered in wounds. He had a painful expression on his face, making him look very miserable. There is no need to waste any more time, put in more effort and finish him off quickly. Yan Tianzheng said excitedly as he sent out another huge black hand. The 7 Bian Peak disciples also became excited. Whoever landed the killing blow would be the one with the biggest contribution. By then, Song Qian would reward them greatly. Their stores of essence were rapidly exhausted as they used all sorts of killing moves. Their initially perfect coordination started to turn chaotic, as they were only think of killing Xiao Chen as soon as they could. However, these people did not notice that, although Xiao Chen had a lot of wounds, his wounds were not all fatal. Furthermore, the wounds were not even skin deep, only scratching his skin. He looked as though he was badly mangled, but they were actually just superficial injuries. He had continuously tempered his body in the past 2 months. It was now very difficult for a normal attack to leave a fatal wound on his body. Xiao Chen had an extremely unsightly expression on his face as he quickly retreated. His footsteps seemed obviously disarrayed, as one would when being beaten around by a violent storm. He narrowly missed trees and stumbled left and right, surrounded by perils. It seemed as though all it took was one last attack and Xiao Chen would die a miserable death. Just at this moment, because the chase was too intense, one of the Bian Peak disciple broke way ahead of the group. Xiao Chen's eyes lit up. He stopped moving and a limitless boundless flame started surging continuously in his right eye. When that disciple saw Xiao Chen stop moving, he was very happy. He leapt into the air and used his saber to hack at Xiao Chen's head. When the blade was just an inch away from Xiao Chen's forehead, a dense flame the size of a finger suddenly fired out from Xiao Chen's right eye. Its speed was extremely fast, piercing right through this disciple's chest. A hole appeared in the chest of this person. Abject terror took hold of him as he incredulously watched the hole in his chest grow larger. He appeared to be trying to grab onto something, but he had no way of stopping the flames from spreading. In an instant, he turned into a pile of ashes that scattered out on the ground. Xiao Ju. The situation that occurred suddenly caught the Bian Peak disciples off guard. TL note. Note that this Xiao is different from the one Xiao Chen has. This one means little and is often used together with a part of the person's name to form a nickname of endearment. So in this case, it's like Little Ju. 3 Bian Peak cultivators who were close with Xiao Ju lost their reason and shouted lividly. They leapt into the air and hacked at Xiao Chen with 6.6 meter long saber lights. Xiao Chen revealed a disdainful smile. This attack from the 3 irrational cultivators seemed very fierce, but they were full of weak points. With some skill, it could be easily dealt with. Xiao Chen took a step back and tilted himself forward slightly as he executed the push technique from the basic saber techniques. There was a huang dang sound as the lunar shadow saber blocked the 3 saber strikes. The huge black hand in the sky formed once again. Yan Tianzheng wanted to make use of this opportunity to destroy Xiao Chen thoroughly. Are you done yet? Xiao Chen snorted coldly and pointed toward the sky with his left hand. His finger resembled a sword as a similar huge black hand materialized. The huge black hand projected Xiao Chen's gesture, using its finger as a sword. It instantly broke through Yan Tianzheng's dragon-seizing hand. Xiao Chen's expression did not change as he opened his fingers. The huge, black fist imitated the actions and turned into a palm with outstretched fingers. How can this be? Without the inherited martial spirit of the Yan clan, it would be impossible to execute the dragon-seizing hand. How could he have learned it? Under Yan Tianzheng's disbelieving gaze, the huge hand smashed down on him, crushing him violently to the ground. He vomited a mouthful of blood. Xiao Chen looked back, and the azure dragon in his body roared angrily. A boundless essence flowed into his right hand, and he struck out with the lunar shadow saber. There was a strong wind as he flung the 3 people in the air away. A bolt of lightning descended from the sky, the lunar shadow saber lit up with a resplendent light. Xiao Chen quickly executed drawing the saber. This was the rushing thunder saber technique that was almost at the great perfection. This strike was as fast as lightning. It carried a chilled wind as it chopped the person preparing to sneak attack from behind him in half. When the 3 Bian Peak disciples saw their companion being chopped in half at the waist by Xiao Chen, they felt a chill in their hearts at the shocking scene. They were stunned for a moment before they grasped their sabers tightly once again and rushed over. Xiao Chen smiled faintly and took a step forward. Another bolt of lightning flashed in the sky as Xiao Chen's momentum slowly built up. Facing the 3 Bian Peak disciples rushing forward, Xiao Chen grasped his saber handle tightly. He casually swung it, and a resplendent arclight appeared. It was flickering with electricity. Bang! Xiao Chen shouted, and the arclight vibrated violently. It gave off a loud sound and generated an intense shock wave as it exploded. The 3 cultivators were immediately blasted back. There were footsteps coming from behind them. The remaining 3 cultivators were coming at him from behind. Xiao Chen ignored them, and he soared into the air, accompanied by a crackle of thunder. Xiao Chen had already perfected this rushing heaven chop. His body seemed to tear through space, creating a rainbow-colored light. The rainbow-colored light disappeared in an instant. After a long silence, there was a loud boom. It pierced through a cultivator and blasted him to smithereens. Xiao Chen paused strangely in midair, standing on nothing. Crackles of thunder kept blooming behind him. The sound waves reverberated within the surroundings, causing the leaves of the trees in the dense forest to fall. Because he did not want to be distracted, Song Qian had not been paying attention to the fight on the other side. Now that Xiao Chen created such a commotion, he could not help but take a look even if he did not want to. In the end, after he took a look, Song Qian turned pale. He originally thought he could deal with Xiao Chen easily. However, Xiao Chen had already killed 3 Bian disciples and even had the upper hand. Lu Sufeng and Chu Xinyan were also astonished at Xiao Chen's strength. They quickly obstructed Song Qian, preventing him from going over to help. The fight between the three of them became even more intense. Song Qian became even more anxious, his blows became heavier, causing the two of them to retreat. However, after the Chu Xinyan revealed her true strength, there was no problem in dealing with Song Qinhei's attacks. Rushing Thunder Chop. Xiao Chen shouted faintly, and the saber exploded in light. He was like a bolt of lightning, descending from the sky and landing on a Bian Peak disciple's head. The lunar shadow saber chopped down, creating a ka-ka sound. The spirit weapon that cultivator used to block with immediately broke into two pieces. The lunar shadow saber did not stop after that, splitting this cultivator into two halves, vertically down the middle. Seeing the two people beside, Xiao Chen did not stop to rest. Connecting his moves smoothly like flowing water, he executed the rushing thunder second chain chop. Xiao Chen's momentum now raised to its peak. The feeling he gave off was like that of a thunder god. With the momentum carried forward from the previous four moves, the saber now carried an extremely huge force behind it. It was also extremely fast, it was unblockable. Shua. The two cultivators to the side were cleanly chopped into halves. The resplendent energy electrocuted them until they were charred black. 3 more to go. Xiao Chen withdrew his saber and stood upright. The momentum he accumulated slowly disappeared. The remaining 3 cultivators were now completely terrified. They wanted to run but were unable to do so. They were afraid Song Qian would cause trouble for them if they did. If that happened, they would be in for a terrible time in Bian Peak. His essence should be almost exhausted, there is no need to be afraid. The 3 of them consoled each other as they rushed at Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen smiled faintly as he suddenly became a blur. The lunar shadow saber turned into 3, and his speed immediately doubled. This is the 3 flowing cloud images. How did he learn it? This was a secret technique only the true inheritor of Bian Peak could learn. After it reached the great perfection, it would be equivalent to an Earth-ranked martial technique. The 3 of them could not understand how Xiao Chen executed it. The 3 of them were caught off guard as Xiao Chen moved past them smoothly, leaving behind horrifying wounds on them. Blood gushed incessantly. Interesting, Xiao Chen murmured to himself. He did not expect the 3 flowing cloud images to be so mighty the first time he executed it using the Battle Sage Origins changing character formula. It was as gentle and quiet as flowing water, yet it had the might of a surging river, gushing incessantly but moving as it was willed, resulting one to be unable to follow it with their eyes. This was the essence of 3 flowing cloud images. After he executed the 3 flowing cloud images, Xiao Chen experienced a sudden comprehension. This was a miraculous state, it was something that could be found but not sought. Xiao Chen completely forgot about the surrounding situation, he was immersed in this miraculous state. The Battle Sage Origins changing character formula continuously replicated the 3 flowing cloud images. Xiao Chen's entire body was like a tiny stream, flowing continuously. The stream slowly surged up violently and became a gushing river. It surged and torrented, creating lots of splashes. No, that's not right, this is not the feel of the 3 flowing cloud images, Xiao Chen thought to himself as his movement patterns of his feet changed. The gushing river slowly calmed and turned into a peaceful sea. There were no waves on the sea, its surface was like a mirror. The floating clouds swam by rapidly on the surface, as though it were another sky. The water flowed slowly under the surface, under the quiet and relentless assault over a long time by the water. A stone, the size of a mountain, transformed into a depression in the ground. Suddenly, Xiao Chen woke up. He could not help but be startled when he looked around his surroundings. He had unknowingly walked a distance of 100 meters. The 3 Bian Peak disciples were also dragged over by him. Their bodies were completely covered in wounds, each one of them incredibly deep. They were as dead as they could be. The places Xiao Chen walked past had a 1-meter deep fissure. It was like water had flowed through it, it was extremely smooth without any bumps. Song Qian looked on in astonishment, his eyes were filled with disbelief. He muttered to himself, this is the state of perfection like water. Even my father has not achieved this. Taking advantage of Song Qinhei's distraction, Lu Sufeng shouted, and a saber light suddenly appeared on his saber. As the saber light pressed forward, Song Qian felt a dangerous aura. He quickly turned his attention back and blocked this attack. As Xiao Chen walked over, he stared at Song Qian, who was fighting. Yan Tianzheng, who was to the side, slowly recovered, struggling to stand up. Dragon seizing hand. Xiao Chen did not even bother to spare him a glance. The huge black hand appeared from nowhere and formed a huge fist. The earth shook. Yan Tianzheng was pounded into meat paste. Xiao Chen was wearing a faint smile as he walked slowly over to Song Qian. He manifested his spiritual sense into a deity in the air. The deity opened its eyes. Its gaze was like a bright torch. The light pierced through the air, firing at Song Qian. This was the deity the ancient sages imitated. Xiao Chen's spiritual sense was naturally not as strong as the ancient sages, but it was sufficient to deal with Song Qian. Song Qian, who was fighting Lu Sufeng and Chu Xinyan, felt a formless pressure. It was like a pair of eyes piercing through time and space, staring into his mind. The closer Xiao Chen got, the heavier the pressure became. He felt as though his heartbeat was synchronized with Xiao Chen's footsteps. Bang! 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 His heartbeat became stronger and stronger, as though it was able to leap out of his chest. Song Qian thought, what's going on? This person is only an inferior grade martial grand master. There is no need to panic. I must stay calm. Although Song Qian was doing his best to stay calm, his hands and feet seemed like they were tied up. He immediately revealed plenty of weak points. Lu Sufeng took advantage of this opportunity and caused numerous wounds to appear on his body. Xiao Chen did not make any moves. He simply stood there quietly, focusing his spiritual sense continuously on the deity. A golden light appeared behind this invisible deity. This golden light was very resplendent, very dazzling. Suddenly a golden light fired from the eyes of the deity. The golden light penetrated Song Qinhei's soul. Song Qian trembled as his eyes widened. His body was temporarily shackled by an invisible force. After the deity fired the golden light, it immediately broke apart. Xiao Chen took advantage of this opportunity and executed the Azure Dragon Cloud soaring art. He seemed to have transformed into a flood dragon and soared into the air. A cloud of dust was kicked up as Xiao Chen went past Lu Sufeng and Chu Xinyan. He arrived before Song Qian in an instant and used his saber to hack at his chest. Boom! There was a loud metallic sound. This fellow was actually wearing a superior grade earth-ranked battle armor. Xiao Chen's attack did not manage to kill him in one blow. However, the huge force gathered on the saber knocked him flying backward. Blood trickled out of the corner of his mouth. It was obvious he suffered a significant injury. Song Qian woke up to reality. He saw that he had lost the advantage, and he turned around to leave quickly. Thinking of running, leave behind the ice crystal flower. Lu Sufeng shouted furiously. He leapt off the ground, and he started spinning on his palm. Lu Sufeng quickly threw the rapidly spinning saber, causing an intense hurricane. The hurricane instantly wrapped around Song Qian and rose into the air. There were miserable cries coming from within. When it finally stopped, Song Qian was covered in wounds and fell heavily from the sky. Xiao Chen walked forward and removed his spatial ring. Pouring everything out, plenty of inferior grade spirit stones fell to the ground, along with plenty of good quality medicinal pills and banknotes. Xiao Chen fished out the ice crystal flower from the pile of items and handed it to Lu Sufeng. A smile appeared on Lu Sufeng's face as he received it joyfully. Seeing that there were at least 100 inferior grade spirit stones, Lu Sufeng's grin became bigger. He asked Xiao Chen, "What are we going to do with the spirit stones?" His meaning was very clear. Are they going to split the loot? However, with Chu Xinyan around, Lu Sufeng could not reveal such a thought. He wanted Xiao Chen to be the one to breach the topic.